Thank you all for coming out tonight. Now, as Chad mentioned when he handed the floor over to me, my name is Connor Lee. I have been passionate, to get more specific on that little story, since I was about 4 years old. And I took my first flight when I was about 8. Don't remember exactly, but it was through a program called the Young Eagles out of Front Range Airport, and a picture from that flight. I was clearly pretty happy when I got back from that flight. And so for my SLE, I worked on getting my private pilot license. So first off, what do you need to do to get your private pilot's license? Well, first, one of the biggest things for me so far has been something called the written exam. And I mean, to give you an idea, the time limit for that is 2.5 hours. Now, it didn't take me quite that long, but it's just a whole bunch of questions, kind of like think of it like an online ACT test or something. And you're just basic questions about flying and everything from aerodynamics to cross-country flight planning. So there was the written exam. There was also, I had to get my student pilot certificate. I had to pass a I had to pass a medical exam. And another big one is I have to get 40 hours of flight time, 10 of which have to be done alone. And within that, I have to have 5 hours of solo cross-country flying, which is a flight of 50 nautical miles or more in distance, which is about the equivalent of 60 regular miles. And then also there's 3 hours of instrument time, which is basically flying solely with reference to the engine gauges and airspeed and all that kind of stuff inside the cockpit. Basically you can't look outside at all when you're in instrument flight training. And so 3 hours of that. And there's a few more things. Let's see. So there's the written, there's the medical. I have to get endorsed by my instructors, the instructors that I worked with. Not sure if there's any who came here tonight. But on my logbook, they have to write an endorsement for that. I'm sure there's some papers that have to be signed as well. And then there's something called the check ride. And similar to the written exam, this is actually an oral exam. Well, it starts on the ground, it's an oral exam, and it's basically a minimum of 2 hours of just question after question. And it's difficult to study for that, let me tell you. I haven't gotten it yet, which brings me into one thing that I would like to talk to you guys about today. What challenges did I encounter? What did I encounter that affected my ability to get the private pilot? And for one, there was, instructor availability. Instructor's not always available, but specifically, I would like to give a kudos to all the instructors at any flight school in the nation, because right now is prime season for pilots, for hiring pilots. The airlines are desperate for pilots, and they're plucking pilots wherever they can find them. And so a lot of the instructors that used to be at my flight school have since gone to the airlines. And so as a result, that makes the remaining instructors that stayed at the flight school much more busy. And so they're often working days 6 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, just flight after flight after flight. And they don't live easy lives, but we're all working towards a greater purpose here. A lot of the instructors are working to go to the airlines as well, or goals throughout the industry. But ultimately, they don't live the easiest lives. They're working hard, and so they deserve heavy kudos. I don't know if anyone came tonight, otherwise I would personally thank them. But so before I go on, I would actually like to also thank those that I worked with outside the instructors. So at my flight school, the head of my flight school, I couldn't have done it without him, because while I wasn't flying, I was interning at my flight school, learning all sorts of new stuff, and it was a really rewarding experience. So instructor availability was one. There was also plane availability. People might be flying the plane that you want to fly, and so plane availability. And then the other big one, pretty self-explanatory, is weather. Too windy, can't fly, and that got at me time after time and time again. I mean, the runways at airports, they're ranged certain ways, and if you have too strong of crosswind, you can't fly. I mean, especially for solo flying, you know, winds can't be, I mean, even for solo flying, you can't have winds as strong as you could for, I mean, even the plane's limitations. So obviously the plane has limitations when flying, and for solo flying, it has to be like practically no wind for you to be able to fly solo. I mean, you can have some wind, but I mean, for solo flying as a student pilot, wind was a really big factor. Of course, there's also clouds, and actually on the very last flight I did, and actually the picture you saw on my title cover, that was a picture from that flight, but the clouds that day affected my ability to do that flight, and I meant to do it in the morning. I ended up doing it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had to wait all day to do that flight, and that was because the clouds were too low. Even though they had broken up a lot, they were too low, they were too close to the ground, so the clouds are another big one. Obviously, I can't fly in thunderstorms, can't fly in snow or low visibility, so weather was a really big factor in this process. But challenges, so that was one thing, but takeaways. So what did I get out of this experience? So there's so much stuff, I can't even remember half the things, but I mean, everything cross-country flying and cross-country flight planning, and how to plan for a cross-country flight, which, like I said, that's 50 nautical miles in distance. I mean, you have to have, as a student pilot, you have to have the exact route you're going to fly. You have to have waypoints. You have to use charts to find those. And then you have to figure out the distances between each waypoint, and a whole lot more. So I got practice with all that, and I got really good with cross-country flight planning and flying. You have to have all the frequencies of controllers that you're going to talk to during the flight. So cross-country flight planning, weather, understanding weather patterns. Like before I do any flight, I have to look at the weather and understand like what is happening at the surface, but also what's happening 3,000 feet above me. And between that, and then, I mean, winds, precipitation, any turbulence, et cetera, et cetera. So weather is another big one. And then, let's see, so airspace. I mean, you look outside and it's a clear blue day, but what you don't see is it's like a hubbub of just, here's one airspace, here's another airspace, below that there's another airspace, and then above that there's this huge airspace, and then, I mean, the DIA, their airspace is divided into like 20 different sectors, and it goes from this altitude to this altitude, or from this surface up to this altitude. So understanding airspaces is huge and really important. So there's airspaces, there's weather, cross-country, understanding the charts and for the aircraft. Like, so there's a chart specifically for wind. Like, you can look at that chart and understand, can your aircraft handle this specific headwind, or can your aircraft handle this specific crosswind? And there's charts for that. There's charts for how long with these specific weather conditions and this specific throttle setting, how far can I go with the fuel I have? I mean, how much fuel can my aircraft carry, and how high can I go with this load I have? So, I mean, understanding the charts and how to read them, especially, and then within that, and all those charts tend to go into something called the Pilot Operating Handbook, or the POH, and it's a huge book. Like the one for the aircraft that I like to fly is about that big, thick, and it's just a whole bunch of charts, and I have to be able to find what I need in an emergency. And you can't, I mean, by rules of my flight school, you cannot fly without that. So there's the understanding and reading the charts. And then, I mean, there's a whole lot more, but that should cover it for now. So where am I currently at? So at the moment, I've gladly completed all my flight time, and actually it was not acquired all during the SLE. 40 hours was that, I don't know anyone who could have, well, that's okay. But I did not acquire 40 hours during the SLE. Actually, back when, around the time I started high school, I joined the flight school that I'm with today, and just over time, just accumulated my 40 hours. Although most of my solo flying hours, those 10 hours I told you about, those were acquired during the SLE, and all the solo cross-country flying, that was all acquired during the SLE. So the flying hours for one, ground studying, I would have the work I would set to do each day, but then after that I would leave about 2 hours to just do self-study time and in preparation for the ultimate test. And actually, so there's the check ride, and then before that there's something called the stage 3. In the process of trying to get that scheduled out right now, but think of the stage 3 as the test before the test. Like, I have to pass that to make sure I'm ready to take my check ride. And if I pass that, then I can go take my check ride. Hopefully and fingers crossed, hopefully I'll make it through that. And then, let's see, so I have to have a class 3 medical. So there's first, second, and third class medical. A third class medical is the only one that you can use to fly a commercial airline, and that's ultimately where I want to go. So the moment where I'm currently at. So I've got my flying hours, just got to get the stage 3 done and the check ride. So where am I going to go with this? Well, so first off, since I was 4, I've been passionate about this. Commercial airline pilot, that's been all I've wanted to do. And so getting the private pilot's license, that's like the first real and major stepstone in that's the first major stepstone in this whole process. And that brings me into college. The final point. University of North Dakota. I was recently accepted into University of North Dakota. It's a top-notch aviation facility. Pardon me, top-notch aviation department there, and one of the best in the nation, and was recently accepted. So if I can get the private pilot's when I get the private pilot's license, I will be ahead of the game when I go to college, both academically and financially, because that will significantly reduce the stuff I have to do at college, because the private pilot portion of the whole process at college is one of the most expensive things that I have to go through out there. So when I get this done, I'm going to be ahead of the game for college, and that will help me academically and it'll help my parents financially. So ultimately, that's where I'm going with this. I know there's more SLE talks to come, so I hope you enjoy them. Thank you.